a sulfite sensitivity, what the sulfites were doing to my body, and how my life has completely changed since I discovered my sulfite sensitivity. I'm Dr. Sidhu, and I am a family practice and lifestyle medicine doctor here in Houston, Texas. I am also the founder of Spring Monarch Primary Care, and I love to work with patients to help them approach their health in a practical, holistic, evidence-based way to help them feeling their best. So today we're going to talk about a food sensitivity called sulfites and how I discovered it, why food sensitivities are often underdiagnosed, and how a food sensitivity can impact a patient's entire life. Let's dig in. To understand my sulfite sensitivity, you really have to understand what life was like before the diagnosis. So I can vividly remember being in fourth grade and having to do the mile run that we do at field day. And it just felt like my legs were so heavy. And I looked around and all these kids seemed to be running, no problem. And that in that moment, something clicked, that something just wasn't right. But I was in fourth grade and you just keep moving on with your life. After that, I just had more stomach issues. My stomach was kind of always hurting. I was always feeling tired. They said I was a lazy kid. I called myself a lazy kid. I didn't really participate in sports. I did try them here and there, but really didn't pursue them. And I would just get tired really quickly. And sometimes I felt like eating, sometimes I didn't. But there was really no explanation for why I felt that way. My parents took me to the doctor often, for regular colds, coughs, checkups, but in our head, it just never was something that needed to be addressed with the doctor. And so it wasn't until years later that I discovered sulfites that I realized that how I felt in fourth grade was actually probably due to this food sensitivity. But there's decades in between that realization and the actual diagnosis. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So I was a lazy kid, then I was a lazy teenager, but I wanted to go to medical school. So I went to medical school, and I was the type of person that I'm a hard worker. So I would work really hard as much as I could. And then if I worked 6 days, I needed an entire day to rest. I would call them my natural days. And so I just needed one entire day to recoup sleep, rest, really just stay on the couch. Going up one flight of stairs, I would get exhausted. I would sometimes get short of breath. And then several times a year, 7, 8, 9, 10 times a year, I would have these episodes, I would call it, where I would get a really upset stomach at night and I would be sick all night in the bathroom all night long. And then because I am who I am, I would just get up in the morning, go to class, go to residency, do whatever I needed to do, and really just move forward. I didn't have a good explanation for why it was happening. I saw several doctors. Some of them laughed at me. Some of them brushed me off. Some of them really genuinely tried to do a workup, but we could not find anything. I went through medical school, went through all the medical school books. Nothing could explain why I felt the way I did. And then in residency, I was diagnosed with something called angioedema. Where the right side of my face really swelled up while I was in the middle of a procedure and I had to go home. I lost 10 pounds in 2 weeks and I saw specialists, I saw my attendings, we did a workup, and the only thing we could come up with was that I had idiopathic angioedema. We knew that it was behaving like an autoimmune disease, but it probably had other triggers, but we didn't know what those triggers were. So I tried to manage the triggers that I knew, but there was something underlying that I just couldn't figure out. Fast forward about 5 years after that, I had 2 children by then. I was continuing with the shortness of breath, the fatigue, but I had now finished residency. I had started a practice. I had 2 children. I was just going about life and this was normal for me. And then I took a trip to Napa. And when we were in Napa, of course, we drank wine, we ate dried fruit, we went on this amazing hot air balloon ride, and when we came down from the hot air balloon ride, we had mimosas. That night, I went back to our family's house. Of course, I got sick. Of course, I got up in the morning and pretended like everything was fine. And then I came home back to Houston, and go to my mom's house, and my brother says, "So how was your trip?" And the thing to understand about my brother is that he is brilliant and he is extremely good at recognizing patterns. And so he said, "How was your trip?" And I said, "Oh, it was okay, but I had one of my episodes," as I used to call it. And he is an accountant by training, and so he, not a physician, not a doctor. And he says, "You doctors are all silly. It's not just one food making you sick. There's got to be a pattern in the food that you're eating that's making you sick." Now just think about that for a minute. From the age of 10 to the age of 33, I had been experiencing the symptoms. Not a single doctor I saw, not anything I learned in medical school had put that realization in my head. I still remember where I was. I was sitting on my mom's green couch, and it was like a light bulb moment. So I pick up my phone and I start asking Dr. Google. And I thought, okay, I've had a lot of wine, so I'm thinking tannins. And I looked at the foods and it wasn't just tannins. And then I came across this word called sulfites. And my whole world changed. Every food that had ever made me sick was on that list of food with sulfites. I can never forget that moment. It just changed my entire life. That one moment gave me my life back. So me and my husband started to learn everything we could learn about sulfites, which honestly wasn't that much because there wasn't that much information on the internet. So we just started by cutting out the obvious sulfites, wine, dried fruit, that kind of thing. We ate out a little less for a while. I cooked more at home, but I was still getting sick. Sometimes, but not as often. But the interesting thing is, as soon as I cut out the obvious sulfites, I actually started to feel better. My energy started to improve. And so I spent the next few years really learning what sulfites were. And what I learned was just shocking. The truth is that the American food chain is absolutely full of substances that don't need to be in there, preservatives, additives. And we know that now in 2025 because additives is sort of a hot topic. But if we're looking back at, 2013, people weren't really talking about additives and preservatives. And so I really had to go back and learn about the American food chain, how our food is made, how our food is processed. And what I learned was that sulfites are often hidden in our food chain. Most of the processed corn in the US is processed with sulfur dioxide, and so it contains sulfites. So any processed corn products, I'm talking about corn-based vodkas to corn tortillas, can have sulfites. The same thing with potatoes. Processed potatoes can have sulfites. It stops them from getting browned. So I had so much to learn. But I still was getting sick because I didn't know all the actual ways to avoid it. And when I get sick mostly at nighttime, and sometimes I would just be in so much pain. And I used to think, at least I know what's making me sick. But there are people out there who are as sick as me, if not sicker, and they don't know why. And that is terrifying. Not only that, I learned that sulfites can actually cause people to stop breathing and have difficulty breathing. And that's terrifying. It's life-threatening. And so I promised myself on those really dark, lonely nights that once I figured it out, I would eventually do something to help educate people about sulfites. So once I started to feel better, I started learning more. And then when I turned 40, my husband handed me a laptop and he said, "No more excuses." And so up until that point, my main excuse was I only had my work laptop and I did not want to create anything on my work laptop due to intellectual property things in my contract. And so him handing me that laptop was his nudge to say, go do it. And so I started by creating my blog, and it really wasn't getting a lot of traction. And I realized that in order to attract people to the blog, I would have to get on social media. In real life, I'm an introvert. Nobody in my life other than my husband and my close family knew I was struggling with really anything. And so I had to put my whole life on social media. I started very slow. I don't think I posted my face for the first 100 posts. But the most amazing thing happened when I put my life on social media. People were coming out of the woodwork and saying that A, they knew how I felt, and B, me sharing my story validated their story. They had experienced the same things I have, where doctors were dismissing them, gaslighting them. They had been sick for years, been in the ER multiple times, and they couldn't figure it out. And it was not only terrifying, but it was frustrating. And so I started to really think about how underdiagnosed food sensitivities are. And I learned that 1 in 5 people can have a food sensitivity. And, I started to think, was I just absent that day in medical school when we learned about food sensitivities? But what I learned is that most medical students spend less than 11 hours of their medical school 4-year career learning about food science. And most of that time is spent on learning proteins and carbs and fats for diabetes and high cholesterol. Almost none, if any, is really spent on food sensitivities. So that's one of the reasons that I, as a physician, and my doctors missed what was going on with me. So how is life different after my diagnosis? So it turns out I'm not a lazy person. I have 3 kids. I've had a full-time job for 19 years. I exercise 5 to 6 times a day. I don't get short of breath when I go up the stairs. I'm busier than most people I know. I love life. I love to travel. I can walk 20,000 steps in Europe without getting tired. I can stay with my husband and watch movies. When my kids were little, I could play in the front yard with them. I could play soccer. I could play basketball. Discovering my food sensitivities gave me a life that I'm not even ever sure I dreamed about. I hoped one day I figured it out. I hoped one day I would figure it out before it really made me sick, but I didn't know this side of me. I didn't know what I was capable of. And now, I've quit my job, but I've started my own practice. I make these YouTube videos. I educate people online, not just about food sensitivities, about their body. I am active in the community. I am active with my children. And I can't imagine where I would be if I didn't discover this food sensitivity. So I am extremely passionate about teaching people about food sensitivities. I am passionate about teaching people about what's in their food and how to look for what's in your food. So it has really, really taken me on this journey. I put my life out there to help people, and I did not expect what I've gotten back in return tenfold. So it's been just amazing. I hope this helps answer some of your questions about how I discovered sulfite sensitivity. If you're watching this video because you've suspected that you have a food sensitivity and this answers questions for you, that is amazing. I love that for you. And if you want to learn more about food sensitivities, just let me know in the comments and I'll make more videos like this. If you liked this video, please like it so I know. Please subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any videos about any other health tips. And please share this video with a friend or family who you feel like is always tired, always having stomach issues, and might benefit from this video. And I will see you guys in